Okay, the third way that we can find slope really could be divided in two ways if you wish, but it relates to certain types of lines in our line. And so we want to look at how parallel lines and slope relate. So the notation for parallel is two double bars. So here I'm writing L1 is parallel to L2 using a cursive L. And so there's a picture of two parallel lines. And then you kind of look at that and think, okay, what would their slopes be? How would their slopes be related? And you see in the picture, well, turns out as much as one goes up, so does the other one. So in other words, their two slopes are equal. They have the same slope. And so if we know the slope of one line and we know that it's parallel, a line that it's parallel to, then we also know the slope of that line. It will be the same. For example, if line 1 had a slope of 2/3 and we knew that line 1 was parallel to line 2, then we'd know without any question that line 2 has a slope of 2/3. Or as another example, if line 1 had this equation, 2x plus 5y equals 8, and we knew that line 2 was parallel to it, we wanted to find the slope of line 2, we said, well, line 2 is going to have the same slope as line 1, so I can just find the slope of line 1. So to find the slope of line 1, we'd have to take our equation, solve that equation for y. So we begin by subtracting off of 2x, then divide both sides by 5. And I went ahead and distributed that 5 through, and got 8/5 minus 2/5 x. So the slope of line 1 is a negative 2/5. And therefore, we know then also that slope of line 2 would also be a negative 2/5. Okay, so that's parallel lines. Fairly straightforward. If you know the slope of one, you know the slope of the other because they're exactly the same. Let us now talk about perpendicular lines and slope. Perpendicular lines, the notation is an upside down T. And again, what that means is that your two lines cross at a 90-degree angle. Now the relationship of perpendicular lines and slope is a little bit more complicated than it is for parallel lines. First off, they're definitely not the same. In fact, if you visualize it in your head, you can visualize taking that line 1 and kind of turning it around. As long as line 1 has a positive slope, line 2 is going to have a negative slope. And if you switched line 1 so that it had a negative slope, well then line 2 would have line 2 would then have to have a positive slope. So they're going to have different signs. And the other thing is that the flatter line 1 gets, the steeper line 2 would get, and vice versa. So those two things get put together to say that the slope of line 1 is the opposite sign of the reciprocal of line 2. The opposite sign of the reciprocal, or you could just say the opposite of the reciprocal. Some examples: if line 1 had a slope of 3/5, and again line 1 and line 2 are perpendicular, then line 2 would be the opposite sign, and then the reciprocal of that, negative 5/3. Line 2, again, would be the opposite, so negative, and the reciprocal of 3/5 would be 5/3. As another example, if line 1 had a slope of negative 5, then line 2 would be the opposite of that, which would make it positive, and then the reciprocal of 5, which would be 1/5. Line 2 would have a slope of 1/5. Okay, so those are the other ways with parallel and perpendicular lines that we can find equation or find the slope of our line. Okay, until our next video, we'll see you then.